arcade racing games in the 1980s were a very mixed bag. You either got a top-down affair like Monaco GP from Sega, or an elevated behind-the-vehicle perspective like Sega Turbo, or a behind-the-vehicle position much like Pole Position 2 from Namco. The big problem I had always found with these games is that they were not actually that fast. Sure, the Speedo would display a super high speed, but that feeling of speed was never really conveyed to the player. At least that's how I felt when playing these games. Enter Sega legend Yu Suzuki, who had an idea to create a racing game that would be so fast in terms of visual representation, but also in displayed speed. And this immense feeling of speed would be accomplished using sprite scaling technology. The original concept for Hang On was a game that would be displayed in a 3D style, but even with the emerging 16-bit hardware of the time, this was not possible, and so sprite scaling technology was used instead. The sprite scaling technology was used for roadside objects and other riders on track. As you approached them, these sprites would get larger in appearance, conveying to the player the real sense of getting close to them. But it was the speed at which the sprites scaled in that made the game appear fast. When compared to other racing games of the time, at home or in the arcades, Hang On was like nothing else I had seen in my 10-year existence up to that point. It was a game that appeared to flash past the player's eyes, and also looked so good and well detailed. The omission of hills is a separate talking point, of course, but this was rectified by Yu Suzuki in later sprite scaler games. The game came in two forms: a sit-on motorcycle type where the player leaned in to turn, and a stand-up cabinet with just a handlebars. I personally never ever played the full sit-on one, but I believe it wasn't too dissimilar to the Enduro Racer one which I was able to play, and from my experience with that, I believe that the upright version of Hang On was the better one for me at the time. The game's name came from the term that riders use when leaning into turns with the knee down, where they have to hang on to the bike. The game only has one course and 5 stages in that course. The game ends when the player either completes the course or the timer runs out. You do not have lives, but you do seem to have an inexhaustible supply of motorcycles, as each crash and hang on results in an explosion, which does look freaking awesome if I do say so myself. The visuals are excellent, as I have already mentioned. The real sense of speed the player gets when bombing it down the track on the twists and turns is outstanding. The main sprite is quite large, and as detailed as it can be, I suppose. The other riders are all just palette swapped variants, and the roadside objects are just typical trees or signs or rocks. In racing games of this era, the backgrounds were just there to separate the track from the sky. The backgrounds didn't scale in, and so it would seem that you never actually get close to your destination. The sound is basic and does let the game down a tad. The music is not really suited to the game, it doesn't really get the heart racing, and actually it is very forgettable. But I guess Hang On was a precursor for better things to come. The sound of the bike is just the usual video game hum, and the sound when you whiz past other riders is actually pretty awful, to the point of annoying. The sound of the explosion, however, is good, and this is a sound I hear a lot in this game, so it's just as well it's pretty decent. In terms of gameplay, it's a racing game. What else can you say? In this era, there was hardly any game that offered customisation or proper 180 degree hairpin corners or anything. You drove as fast as you can and turned left or right, but the sheer feeling of speed was enough to make this game enjoyable for a few hours. With only one course and 5 stages, it didn't have much long-term appeal. But then, when walking past this in arcades as I did in 1986, it was hard to ignore because of those super fast visuals. I do admit having enjoyed a go or two on this in those days, but it wasn't actually a game I yearned for on home formats. But when I got my Sega Master System a few years later, it was a pack-in game for the device, and so I was happy to give it a go and see just how close to the arcade the Master System would be. Well, the Master System version of Hang On does seem to be missing a few things, notably the feeling of speed and the music. That's not to say the game is slow, it's just not as fast as the arcade original. But I guess the music was maybe a step too far for the humble Master System, but that might be a good thing, as most Master System games that didn't utilise the FM sound chip sounded rubbish. Actually, the FM sound chip games didn't sound too much better. But I guess it's like saying which one is better, gonorrhea or syphilis. You don't really want either of those, but they are fun catching, just like Hang On the Sega Master System. It's a fun game to play. The controls, as you imagine, are different from the arcade. With no handlebar, it's just a case of moving left to right. But the one thing I did always find annoying on Master System racing games is that you press down on the controller to change gears. And with the shape of the D-pad on a Master System control pad, I often found myself turning left or right and accidentally leaning more towards the up, and thus change down a gear mid-turn. To combat this, I usually play Hang On using down left or down right to turn. You also have 3 gears, and my memory of the arcade cabinet is a little hazy, but I can't recall if the arcade had any gears or not. Also, unlike the arcade game, this just goes on and on. You still have the 5 stages, of course, but as soon as you complete them, you just start again, but on a harder setting. Visually, the Master System just doesn't have the same impact as the arcade, but your rider seems to be the $6 million man Steve Austin or something, as he just goes in flames in the almighty fireball that appears when you crash. And then, as if by magic, you and the bike are fine, and you go about your day as if nothing had happened. I mean, that's a nice touch, I suppose, as it would really suck if the game ended there. Then you might have to end up arranging a funeral, being involved in an inquest, and all that stuff. Anyway, back to the game. And for all the differences Hang-On and a Master System has compared to the arcade, it is a good game. I can see why it was packaged with the machine in the West. It's a good example of what the little 8-bit machine could do, and was far better looking than most NES games of the time. And it's a simple, fun game to play, especially with a friend, as you can see who can get the furthest or get the highest score or something. Hang On is one of those games that maybe doesn't get enough praise as it should. It helped keep the arcade video game industry going with the introduction of Taiken or motion simulator games such as Space Harrier, Afterburner and A Fantastic Outrun, and it was influential in how other racing games would be, and in my opinion is a bit of an unsung hero in video games. And that was my look back at Hang On by Sega. If you like this video, then please do give me a sub and a thumbs up, or maybe even a comment or two below about your memories of Hang On. And that's all from me, folks. Thanks for watching.